This episode of Vintage Stormfront Freaks has been previously recorded.
I am personally pumped for you, Vince Waelti, who's been chasing and documenting extreme weather since 2014. And in 2020, he decided to make it a lifelong mission and left his low-paying career in EMS to provide virtual storm chasing tours, which have evolved into an interactive live stream hosted on YouTube. On March 31st, 2023, Vince got within a couple hundred yards of an EF4 tornado, which I think is terrifying.
Ooh,
Yeah, like
Vince.
I've never done that before. That's crazy. So first of all, Vince, we're gonna have all the questions for you tonight, but we have to know, what are you drinking?
Okay, are you ready for this?
I don't know if we are, but I'm excited.
So I already got kicked out of here once. I think Phil booted me. I'm back. I don't know, but anyway, so we'll see if this holds out. So I don't really drink, but I have the tears of my haters in red.
Oh
Taco Bell
yeah.
cup. And it's actually, I think
Is
this
that
is
Taco Bell?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's pink something. It was supposed to be a Diet Pepsi, but this is what they sent me, so that's what we got.
It's okay. Vince,
So
I
we're
love
gonna
it.
make do with it.
Awesome.
Usually, Vince, I have like
background too.
What?
Is that
Is there
snow in the background on the ground? Yeah, like
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
he's up in North
that is actual
Dakota.
snow.
that
That
is
is real
that
life
is
snow.
ludicrous. I did see that on Twitter that you were winter chasing. And I'm like, oh my god, I can't think about snow right now. Like it's 80 out. Like summer's never ending. But you're there chasing snow already.
It's cold. It's like
Yeah.
18. So
Is
I'm
it?
jealous of
Ooh.
you.
Whoa. I kind of am
Vince.
too. I like the cold snow stuff.
Yeah, I bring
Yeah.
the snow down here, Vince. I think, Gina, we're gonna get snow in Atlanta, just so you know. I think it's gonna happen
Come
this winter.
on. Yeah,
I
I
know.
want it.
Yes. So Vince, we have to ask this question because most people who are obsessed with weather, they're weather geeks, meteorologists, they have some kind of story that got them into weather. Do you have a story like that when you were a little kid, or how did you get involved in everything?
I don't know. Everybody always asks me that, and I have not found an answer. I have a terrible memory anyway. I actually forgot how old I was the other day and had to do the math. So I don't
love
think
it.
there was really, yeah, I don't think there was a
And you're
specific
not even
event.
a drinker. God
No,
bless.
yeah, exactly. See, it's not artificial. So I don't know, maybe drinking would help, but I don't think there's a specific event. It's just it's always been part of my life and something I've always wanted to do. Someday maybe something will, make sense, but I don't know what happened. I guess I just, woke up one day and decided this is what I needed to do.
I love it.
When you
So
said you got, let me ask one thing. When you said you got within a couple hundred yards of a EF4, did you mean to get within a couple hundred yards?
Yes and no. So this thing was in rural Iowa, and the road was going almost due straight east-west. The tornado it looked like it was going to cross, north-south, but it ended up kind of brushing the road a little bit. So kind of a trajectory issue. But the problem, I shouldn't say problem, is partially a lot temporary lapse in judgment. But there was another chaser behind me. That was Brandon Kopic. He's in the famous video that you'll see. He's on the radio yelling at me. He's like, "Hey, there's a tornado right there." And I'm like, "Yeah, no kidding. There's a tornado right there. Like, I'm not stupid." I'm looking over my left shoulder. There's actually a tornado a little bit farther away on the ground behind us. And he's like, stop your car. And I'm like, why? And I look over to my right and he's like, there's a tornado right there. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure as shit there is. So there's actually a larger tornado that was about to tear a barn apart that was right there. And I was focused on the other one.
Wow.
And yeah, but safety was in mind. Obviously I wasn't going to drive into the thing, but it wasn't intentional. I was attempting to reposition for what I thought was the tornado, but the tornado was trying to
Was there two or
reposition for me.
three?
There was two.
Dang.
It eventually, I think there was a third, but that supercell had two at one point.
I just
Which is
couldn't imagine
crazy.
you're chasing a tornado and you're like, hey, this is like when we were chasing guys. I mean, imagine we're driving down that road. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait a sec, there's another one. Like that would be insane. Because you think you're safe and then you just look and you're like, wait a second, I'm not, And then I don't know. That's so how
We'd
did
be
you
yelling,
get
Serena,
away?
stop!
Yeah, exactly. How did
Exactly.
you get? Did you just stop and did it pass, or like how did you have to? Did you have to like U-turn and get out of there?
Well, we can get into the specifics because there's a lot of things that you shouldn't do as a storm chaser here, and we can talk extensively about this here in a bit. But basically, you know, it's not yes and no. I mean, there was some backing up and some choice words. Usually, if you drop the F bomb at least 5 times, you're okay. If it's more than that, that's like an indicator that this is probably a bad situation. So there was some backing up, window fogged up, I couldn't see. So I
Oh,
was kind of hoping that nobody was behind me. So I'm asking on the radio, I'm like, can you, make sure there's nobody behind me? And the response I'm getting is like, just back up. It's like, that doesn't help. But, it's in the situation. It's like, okay, well, back up is not, hey, there's a car right there. So you kind of just sit and watch it, but at the same time, you're trying to juggle cameras and everything. So, you know, you would think this was like a 5 minute long event, but it was there and gone in 20 seconds. It
wow.
was moving 60 miles an hour. So there was just no time to
What?
do anything other than, point the camera and turn around and, floor it. So
Were you
that's
by
about what we did.
yourself? Were you by yourself?
In the car, yeah, like I said, there was another chaser
Jeez.
behind me. I think at the time that was it on the road. Luckily, I'm glad, honestly, that there was nobody else on the road there because that would have been a mess with that large tornado going across the road. And if people, get right on your bumper and you do need to back up and you can't, now you're like trying to do this U-turn and there's a tornado and that doesn't usually end very well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
good
is
luck. What kind of road was it? Was it a dirt road or was it a paved road?
It was actually a state highway that I've driven
Okay.
on probably 50
Okay.
Oh
times
wow.
and didn't
Okay.
Oh,
even
nice.
notice it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, just from our chasing ride, I imagine like you're on a dirt road, and then you're like, well, I'm not going anywhere. It's wet, so
Yep.
that'd be terrifying. That would be terrifying for sure. But
So
oh
when
my
was your
so
goodness.
first
have you?
chase, Vince? Oh, sorry.
First one, I don't
Yeah.
You're good.
I don't know when. So back in 2014, that was my last year of high school. So I started kind of venturing out on my own. I was turned 18 in January and all that. And I'm like, okay, so I'll go be an adult, go do these adult things, did some local chasing and stuff. But up until 2019, I was primarily just Dixie Alley, just because of work. The only time I could get away was, February, March, April, and then sometimes November. So I didn't actually see a tornado in the plains until I think it was May 17th or 19th, 2019, the McCook tornado in Nebraska. I did terrible, but
Hmm.
I got a picture of it from, like 20 miles away. But I don't even remember my first tornado just because I always remember being in a hurry to get, from Wisconsin to Louisiana and back or something like that. But the first storm chase that I like remember in detail was that 2019 chase, just, being out in the plains, where you're supposed to be when storm chasing and actually finally seeing a tornado that's, not obscured by pine trees.
Mm-hmm. Because that's the biggest. What's your biggest difference you think with the Dixie Alley versus the Plains?
Dixie Alley's fun because you get that adrenaline rush to a point.
Fun.
It's not, well, I
But
shouldn't
it's
say
scary.
it's entertaining. It's never fun at the end of the chase because typically we get these deadly tornadoes down there, and that obviously ruins everything. But a lot
Mhm.
of times, there's like this thrill factor down there. You never know what's going to come out behind the trees, but of course it's dangerous, and you have to be cautious of that. And it does once you're the anticipation of the chase is exciting. It's fun, but once you get chasing, it's not because it's like, okay, is there a tornado behind the tree or is it just RFD coming around? Oh no, that's a tornado, and I got to turn around, but I can't because Interstate 20's got a forest for a median, and you can't turn around. So you're trying to calculate: do I floor it? Do I stop? Do I get out? What do you do? Whereas out in the plains, you get to enjoy it and you get to show the viewers when you're live streaming, 6 hours straight of just this big
Mhm.
supercell spinning. And you don't do that in Dixie Alley. You go down there for a 12-hour chase, you get 2 minutes of something that someone wants to see, but you go out to Kansas or whatever, and as long as there's a storm, there's something. I always tell my viewers, as long as there's a dark cloud, we'll do a live stream because that's all you need. You can see for miles and you can screw up out there too. You don't have to be that good to see something. You can see tornadoes from 20 miles away. So I'll take planes over Dixie any day. That's traditional storm chasing. That stuff down in the southeast. I do it because it's my job, but it's definitely not something that I really look forward to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there ever a day where you're like in the southeast where you're just like, "Ah, I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not doing it. I'm not making the trip east." Or if it's like, hey, there's a slight risk. There's a marginal risk. It's the only game in town. There might be some tornadoes. Like, are you gunning it?
I'm there for everything. Just it's
Wow.
become my job.
Dedication.
But before it was my job, yeah, I would sit stuff out. I remember we had the 2020 or 21. We had those 2 high risk days down there, and I
Mhm.
sat one of them out because I was too late leaving. But I also didn't feel bad about it because it's like, you're going to go down there. It's a high risk. There's going to be tornadoes flying around. That's fine. That's what you want to see as a storm chaser. Don't give. Everybody always is like, oh, I don't want to see tornadoes. We don't. Well, we want to see tornadoes, but not ones that hurt people, and that's really
Right.
rare down there. But
Yeah.
I didn't feel bad about it because it's like the chances that you're going to see that are almost zero. The chances you're going to come across damage is pretty high, but you're damage chasing down there. It's not even tornado chasing at that point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you had to use your EMS background at all to help anybody? Because you're seeing all this damage.
Yeah, several times, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm trying to advocate for people to be prepared for this stuff because there's a lot that you can do as a lay person or as a non-trained individual just besides calling 911 or comforting somebody. But we've had several incidents. Rolling Fork, I was in Silver City as one of the first ones there, and it was so
Mm.
chaotic. Fire department just everybody was in Rolling Fork, so nobody was in Silver City, which was the next town up from Rolling Fork that got smashed by this thing too. And there's people everywhere and people just running around. I remember finding the fire chief, and I said, "What do you need me to do?" And he looks at me, and I believe I think it was actually the fire chief from a neighboring department that had arrived, but he literally handed me a piece of paper and he said, "Write down what we should do." And I'm like, "What do you
Oh
mean
my
write down what we should
God.
do?" And he goes,
Wow.
"Write down what you see back in there and tell me what we need to do." He goes, "We have never seen this." I'm like, "Okay."
Wow.
So I'm trying
Oh,
to not step on people's toes, but take that role of somebody with some seniority here, and you really end up working together with public safety when you have whether it's first aid training or you're an off-duty cop or a doctor or a medic of some sort. You're going to use it whether it's chasing or driving. I stop at more accidents than I do tornado damage. You come across somebody that's pinned in a car and you need to sit there and comfort them or
mm.
throw some cones out, make sure they don't get rear-ended by an 18-wheeler. So it's not just the chasing where I find myself using some of this medical training. It's the driving. 100,000 miles a year. You're
Ooh,
gonna find
Jeez.
people that need some sort of assistance.
Yeah.
Vince, let's talk about talking about accidents, unfortunately, but you've been chasing for quite a while. How has it changed from when you started chasing in 2014 to now? Because I know there's a lot more traffic on the roads, it's a lot more dangerous, but describe that to everybody, like just what you've seen in your life, in chasing.
I've noticed, and every storm chaser, because the haters, they're out there. I'm filling this cup with their tears right now. Somebody's gonna call me out on this, so I'm gonna add this disclaimer.
Yeah.
Every storm chaser drives distracted. I get it.
Mhm.
Technically, honestly, everybody drives distracted. I turn
So,
down, go and mess with my Apple CarPlay to put the gas station in. Yeah, I'm technically distracted, but there's a difference between driving distracted and driving reckless to a point. You see these people that somebody will quick open their phone and click gas stations and navigate. I don't think those are the people that we've seen an increase in. What I've seen a lot is people with their phones like this all day going down the road. I'm up here covering winter weather. This is literally what I did for like 8 hours on a live stream today. I'm just complaining about people's driving because somebody's about to rear end someone because they're on their phones like this. And I've noticed that as phones and technology, whether it's tablets, CarPlay, your phone, whatever gets more popular, there's more distracted driving. And separate from the chasing, I'm terrified of covering these winter storms. And anybody that watches my live streams knows that I am so paranoid about getting rear-ended because it's happened before that I don't want that. I don't care if you have the best insurance or not. You're still screwed when you get in an
yeah.
accident.
Mhm.
oh yeah.
That's without my truck, I'm done. And it takes, 2 weeks to install all that stuff. So I'm out if I get hit. So I'm terrified of accidents, honestly. I think that we have seen an increase in distracted driving overall. And I think that kind of bleeds over into the chaser community where I have actually seen kind of the opposite. I've noticed more people advocating for, not driving distracted, not driving 90 miles an hour down the 2-lane road in the middle of the night. I think that this big chaser safety push has actually maybe reversed some of that, whereas kind of the general public is maybe sitting there with their phones in their face still.
Yeah.
Vince,
Does
what
that
do
have
you think
anything to
every
do with?
chaser?
Oh,
Oh,
go ahead, Dina. Nope, Dina, it's all
what
you.
do you think every chaser should have in their car as far as like bandages, peroxide, what should we have in our cars?
It's a great
I don't
question.
know if I'm the most qualified person for that, but I'll answer it anyway. But the most qualified person for that's like Dr. Jason Persov, the storm doctor. I like Jason, big fan of him, fellow storm chaser, doctor in Colorado. He's always suggested to people, one thing I've heard him preach, is tourniquets. I've heard lots of people preach trauma dressings, like big pads that are absorbent. They make these things now. They're called Israeli bandages. It's kind of like a tourniquet you think like wrap, but it's got a tourniquet. So it's a bandage. You can wrap it around somebody's leg. Let's say they had something stuck in them. They've pulled it out, which they shouldn't do. You need to apply pressure to that bleeding. You put that around, wrap it, you tighten it down, and it kind of makes things a little bit, not idiot proof, but it makes it quicker, because even if you have the best training, in the heat of the moment, half of that training you forget anyway. So basically, a lot of folks I see out there wanting to carry all these fancy gadgets and stuff, I think it's best to carry the basics. Carry a box of Band-Aids. Like, you're going to need them. I use Band-Aids all the time. Tape, duct tape. You can do lots with duct tape. Towels. You can do a ton with towels. You can make a tourniquet. You can apply pressure. You can do all sorts of things. But I would just keep, an assortment of bandages, your flashlights for at night, maybe a permanent marker to write down, if you apply a tourniquet, you want to write that down and say, hey, it was applied at such and such time. And just basic things like that. Make sure you've got what you need to take care of yourself if you get a minor injury. That's why I carry a tourniquet on me all the time, just for a couple other reasons as well. But if there's an accident, if I'm in an accident, your duct tape, like I said, duct tape, I think we've used more duct tape in the EMS field than anything, stabilizing patients, whatever. But the best tool that you have is what's on you. It's like they always say, the best camera you have is what's on you. So get a small bag, put some basic supplies in, some bandages, some rolled gauze, and stop the bleed. That's the biggest thing, it's stop the bleed. We talk about the ABCs, airway, breathing, and circulation. You come across someone, check their airway. If it's not blocked, are they breathing? Yes or no? If they're not breathing, is the blood circulating? So you always want to fix, your airway, your breathing, and of course then your circulation. And any sort of effort's not going to do very good if somebody's bleeding out. So stuff to stop the bleed, I would say, would be the number one kind of safety item you'd want to keep in some sort of medical bag.
That's a great advice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
that is
talk
good.
about cameras and equipment that you have, Vince. What are some of your favorite things that you use to stream?
So it's a good thing Greg's not here, because he'd probably call me out for this. So this is an iPhone 14 Pro Max, and almost everything that I post on the internet is from that.
Woo!
Wow.
You rock, Vince! You
Hey,
rock!
Yeah.
I
Feels
Hey,
am
Greg, I
ecstatic.
approve. Okay,
I'm
I'm basically
really-
the new Greg. I approve.
I'm gonna put some more tears in the cup, and I hate this. Really good friends of mine are gonna kick my butt for saying this, but I made a career with my iPhone. You don't need the DSLR to take good pictures. You need good camera equipment, and you need to know how to use it, which I think is the important thing. You need to know how to
Yeah.
use and compose a shot. But I always tell people, if you're just starting out, just use what you have. So I use an iPhone for most of my stuff. My streaming equipment, I actually have it's a LiveView LU600. It's got 6 or 5 cellular connections, and it's got a satellite connection, and then that goes into a camcorder. It's got a switch. There's a camera on the roof. All that fancy stuff. But if somebody's just going to live stream, and they're not, if they're in an area with good cell coverage and stuff, you can do that from a phone too. It's going to be a pain. It's going to overheat. The connection's not going to be the best, but you can do it. So that I try to keep it as simple as possible. The live streaming is a little bit different, but if I'm going to take a tornado video, tornado's crossing the road in front of me, I'm pulling my iPhone out, because I push and hold. I can lock the autofocus, and I can just hit the camera, and I know that it's recording. I don't know how to use a fancy camera, and I'm too dumb to learn. So if I'm trying to figure this out, I got 20 seconds to get this wedge going in front of me. I don't know how to get this out or what lens to choose, so I'm pulling out my iPhone 9 times out of 10.
Same. Every time I try, I'm like, by the time I figure out all this stuff I need to do, it's gone. The storm's gone, lightning's gone, the tornado's gone, everything's gone. And then I'm like, what did I just do?
Every time. GoPro's a
It's
good
nice-
option too.
It's nice with the
I like
iPhone, 'cause you
GoPros.
can automatically
Those are
upload it. It's not like another step. Like my camera, I have to like Wi-Fi it over to my camera and then upload it. So
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
steps.
Yeah, JRB Storm says the best camera is the one that's available. And I think even Greg
100%.
would agree with that. I'm going to go ahead and put words in Greg's mouth. And say that Greg would agree
that
with
He would
that.
agree with
Fun.
that. I feel like
Yeah.
he would.
I
He's been
think
on
he
a lot of
would.
storms.
Vince, talk about I guess I don't know if I want to say I've always wondered this, but when you're in the field and you take a video, right? Is it like are you trying to be the first one to post it, the first one to get, because there might be 10 other storm chasers on that shot, right? Obviously if you're live streaming, you're gonna get it. But is that something you're also thinking about too? Is like trying to get that video or image or whatever like as quickly as you possibly can, and because I've always wondered, like, are storm chasers thinking about that as they're going, or are they just like, hey, I'll post it later, that'll be something I'll do tonight, or another time.
So you guys had Charles Peak on the show a while ago,
Mhm.
and the reason I talk about that is Charles is I consider him a pretty good friend, and he always makes the comment, the social media chasers. That's where I got that whole thing from, and a lot of the social media chasers, I don't really consider myself part of that, but a lot of the social media chasers, they have to get that stuff up because they're making their media sales, they're using their brokers or whatever the heck they want to do, or however they do it. I don't know. I don't do that. They do that. They need to get it up because their sale and their views are going to come from that. I don't really care so much. I mean, yeah, I get a tornado. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to tweet this. But if it takes me 20 minutes to pull over and get a screenshot and put a watermark on it, that's fine because I live stream literally everything that I do. I have not been on a storm chase except for
Mm.
one time that was an accident a couple of weeks ago. There was a tornado like 2 miles from my house that just happened on a 0% day, and I wasn't streaming for that. Obviously, that was the first time in like 4 years that I haven't streamed a storm chase. And
Wow.
so it's already happening, and I feel like if people are going to follow me, they're going to watch that. And honestly, half the time I don't even upload the darn video. Like I very rarely do I upload processed photos or anything. So I'm not really in a big hurry, but that is a big thing. A lot of these, kind of like middle of the line between professional, like doing this as an income or doing this as a hobby. Those folks that try to get media sales and stuff, it's important to them. They get their tornado, the chase is over, they pull over, they got to find Wi-Fi, they got to do it, and they got to get it up. And I just don't like doing that. Some people do, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the only way they can get their sale. Otherwise, somebody else is
Yeah.
going to get it.
Yeah. And I think I have watched your stream before, by the way, and it was awesome. The question I have, to kind of follow that is I feel like there's a lot of people starting to get into the streaming. Like, how did you get into it? How did you start? And how did you grow your channel to where it is today? Like what did you focus on? Do you just say, hey, I'm just going to focus on being a great storm chaser and being a great personality? Like, how did you get your channel to where it is today?
So I started streaming on Facebook, which I wasn't good at. I was getting like for like 4 years, I got like 28 concurrent views, and I'm like, all right, guys, let's hit 30, and we hit 30, and then one would drop off. I'm like, I quit, whatever. So I basically decided, all right, YouTube's what I need to start with, and there's really no good way to live stream. Everything you have to do is it's got to be custom. You don't go to Best Buy and say I need to buy a live streaming thing. You got to set up a server. You got to do all this crap. So basically, I believe it was Hurricane Ida. My friend Ryan Hall, of course, former guest, sends me a Twitter message, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to like play together today?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. What do you want to do?" And he's like, Let's do like a team live stream here." So
Hmm.
that's kind of what put the bug in me. I'm like, all right, so if we're gonna work together, and he's gonna be on YouTube, like I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. So like the next day, I'm like, all right, we're gonna revamp the YouTube. So I get home from this hurricane, I'm like, we're gonna go on YouTube, and I started. And honestly, I don't really know exactly how I got that first 1,000 subscribers, but to get monetized and make money, you need that 1,000 subscribers, and it took me probably a year to get there. And when it finally happened, I remember I'm looking at my phone, I'm like, oh, okay, so this happens, now what? And it was almost like it was game over because I'm like, well, now what? Like, so it's just been constant. Get out there and do it. You have to. The only way to do this is to just be out for everything. So you have to enjoy doing this and just be out there and go out there.
Yeah.
Just show up for work every day.
No, that's pretty awesome. So is that like the big reason why you decided, because you could either do like storm chasing tours like a lot of people do, but you went like this virtual route. Was it because of like the Ryan Halls? Is it because of the distracted drivers? Like, tell me a little bit more about why so much it was like, no, we're going to go on this virtual route.
So I always thought it would be fun to be able to just be, all I want to do in life is chase storms and come home and do whatever. So I'm like, the one way that I knew I could do that is if I turned what I already wanted to do into kind of passive and active way to make money. So I'm like, all right, so I need to either learn how to sell stuff, make media sales, or do whatever. So I'm like, okay, well, one thing that I can do is put a camera in the car and make people feel like they're there. That's not going to be a nuisance to me. It's going to keep me busy and keep me company. Like, I think this is what I need to do. So that's why I started doing. I'm like, we're going to take everybody along and show them the sky. And I just built this amazing fan base, and we've got fantastic moderators. There's a team behind the scenes. Now I work with Radar Omega. I manage a couple of storm chasers here that are in the app, and we're building a fantastic product there. And one thing that's what's amazing when you go and do something like this, kind of in the freelance world, you can take one thing and make 5 other different income streams, and then you don't have to necessarily be tied to one. If you get tired with one, you can go to the other. But I'll never get rid of the live streaming. That's the bread and butter. If there was one thing in the world that I'm happy with, it's the live stream, because you can bring those people with, and then they allow you to basically be out there to enjoy this at the cost or the expense of you letting them ride in the seat, but they're not actually there, but to them it feels like that it is.
Welcome to Outbreak, a new live stream format brought to you by the Stormfront Freaks podcast, hosted by me, meteorologist Brady Harris, also known as Stormcat 5. We'll go live on days of extreme weather with the goal of keeping you safe, informed, and entertained. The only question that remains is, are you ready for the outbreak?
He's an associate professor and the director of the atmospheric science program at the Ohio State University. He's also an expert
Bucks!
on
Baby, go Bucks!
he's also let me finish the intro here.
Sorry, you know what? There's a lot of hate here in
people.
Penn
Get
State.
excited.
There's a lot of hate here in Penn State for the Buckeyes.
He's
So just
hey, we don't listen. We don't want to discourage our viewers. We
no,
don't want to
that's
do
all
too
right.
much.
I love all college football, but the Bucks are the best.
All right,
keep
but
going.
anyway, Dr. Hobgood's also an expert in tropical cyclones, which we're really the focus here as we're getting into hurricane season. Dr. Hobgood, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So just a couple things to get out of the way first. Number one, as you already can tell, we've got a couple people. Brady obviously is attending the Ohio State University.
Let's go.
I've only since found out that Dina is also a graduate of the Ohio State University.
Yeah. Woo!
Let's go.
Dr. Hobgood, he was my professor.
Wow.
And unfortunately, Maz, who isn't able to join us here tonight, we'll see if he can jump on, but he actually had you at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln when he got his meteorology degree there. So there's a big connection. But the main reason I wanted you on, because I didn't have a connection with you that way, I wanted to have you on because I knew you were really a big fan and expert of hurricanes and cyclones. And as we're getting into this season, I thought, hey, what a great person to have on as a guest to kind of ask some questions and find out what's going on. But Brady did say you were a fan of Diet Coke. So I brought my Diet Coke tonight, and I am not a fan of Diet Coke, but it does go good with a little Captain Morgan.
Here.
Of course.
Right.
I'll tell you what, though.
It's
with
a very
Dr. Hobgood,
What's that?
It is a very versatile drink, and with Dr. Hobgood, it's rare. It's rare to see him without a Diet Coke. From having him in class, he would bring it to class. He would have it to and from class walking. He had to go through at least a couple a day, and I can see why. I love Diet Coke as well, Dr. Hobgood. I'm definitely on your side.
Are you talking about a couple of cans or a couple of liters?
Both.
So I also need to ask this question to you. Is it okay if at least on the show if we call you Jay? Is that fair?
Oh, please call me Jay. I mean,
Okay.
that's what everybody calls me. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I knew these students.
This isn't an oral exam.
Yes.
That's
Yes. I'm still in exam mode, all right, Dr. Hobgood? Or Jay,
That's
sorry.
right.
Let's see. It's
Well,
ingrained.
enjoy it. You get to ask me questions.
this time. That's true.
Oh, here we go.
All right,
there you
so
go.
Jay, I'm going to start off. I'm just going to start off the questions a little bit because I do want to know. My understanding of your bio is you don't necessarily have a background on the coasts. So where did your interest in tropical storms and cyclones and hurricanes come from?
Well, when I was growing up as a kid, my parents got tired of northern winters. So they moved us from the Midwest down to Northwest Florida, just north of Panama City. And the first fall we were down there, a hurricane came across South Florida, came out into the Gulf of Mexico, came right up over us. Now, it was a tropical storm by the time they got there, but I mean, the wind was blowing, the water was coming up in the bay, it poured rain. I was fascinated. So I started reading everything I could about hurricane, following the weather any way I could. I mean, this was a long time ago. And so I sort of turned a hobby into a career.
So it did start on the coast a little bit, huh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was always interested in science, and then this is something you could see all around you. And of course, I mean, the weather there was interesting because we'd get the sea breezes in the afternoon, thunderstorms every day. And I mean, you could go, we go to the beach a lot, and you could see the waves. And when a storm would come, I mean, the waves would get a lot bigger. And so I was just fascinated by all that.
So how do you continue your expertise in hurricanes while teaching in Nebraska and Ohio?
Well, fortunately, somebody invented the internet, and so data everywhere. Yeah, and I mean, Nebraska, obviously, it was a little earlier in my career, so it was a little harder to keep track of what was going on. But there was still, weather data, satellite images available. And, now you can be anywhere and pretty much have access to any information you want.
And I can vouch for Dr. Hobgood as well. Whenever there was any sort of tropical system in the Atlantic during school, all we would have to do is bring it up. I remember Joaquin, we actually had, I think, an exam like a week or two later, and we were going over some stuff for the exam, and all we had to do was bring up Joaquin, and that was class. So he he kept up.
Any
with
excuse to talk
stuff.
about hurricanes. Yeah.
Oh yes, we always took advantage of that. Although I did enjoy talk as well. It was very very interesting.
That's much better than deriving equations.
I can understand that. I think so too.
So give us a little bit of a clue, Jay. What it seems like it's a little bit unique of a start to the season with all the activity going on in the Pacific. We've kind of had, until relatively recent, but there's really kind of been a lull in the Atlantic. What's going on with the season?
Well, it was really odd because, of course, we had that one hurricane out in the far eastern Atlantic in January, which had never happened before. Mm-hmm. And then we had 3 early season storms in June. And nothing now for the last 6 weeks. Really, the last 6 weeks, though, were pretty much what you'd expect. And sometimes we get a storm in July, sometimes we don't. But the big high-pressure system over the Atlantic that's sometimes called the Bermuda High has been steering everything to the south, and it's been developing in the eastern Pacific instead. And so we've actually had a record number of storms in July in the eastern Pacific. Pattern started to shift a little bit last week when we had Earl develop east of Belize and become a hurricane, and then move across Mexico and turn into Tropical Storm Javier that hit Baja, and some of that moisture is coming. So it's a little odd. On the other hand, it's also sort of what we normally expect this time of year. August now, we're getting into the time when it should really get active.
So, Jay, I think a lot of people are wondering, because I know I've seen several articles. I know AccuWeather actually put out an article talking about this year's hurricane season and how we're due and how it's bound to happen. What do you see for the rest of the hurricane season? I think a lot of people in Florida are worried that something might impact them this season. I know it's impossible to predict at this point, but are indications that it's going to be more active or, right on normal, kind of like what we've seen so far?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what I think here in a minute, but NOAA just put out their updated August forecast this afternoon, and they're still calling for a more active season. They're saying like there'll be between 14 and 17 named storms, 8 or so hurricanes, and 2 to 4 major hurricanes. And I think what we're looking at is probably a pretty normal year from this point to the end of the hurricane season, which would be maybe 2 or 3 more storms here later in August, somewhere between 3 and 5 storms in September, which is the busy month, and then 2 or 3 storms in October. And you expect at least half those to be hurricanes. And the waters in the Western Atlantic, the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico are warmer than normal.
Okay.
So if things develop in those regions, they have the potential to get quite strong. Right?
Okay.
Now, as you indicated, you can't tell for sure where they're going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, based on the weather pattern we have with that big high over the Atlantic, it does look like storms are more likely to form in the Caribbean, the Western Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
So is the lull that's going on, and I say lull in regards to major storms that have impacted the eastern seaboard, is that due to some climate change issues? Is that just a matter of how the dice have been rolled to this point?
I think to some extent it's just luck. And another thing I think you have to be careful about with looking at those statistics is Sandy doesn't officially count as a hurricane or a major hurricane hitting the U.S., but it did major hurricane damage. I mean, it cost $50 billion worth of damage to the U.S.
Right.
So, to me, that's a major hurricane hitting the U.S., even though it wasn't labeled a major hurricane. It wasn't.
So why is that? Was it land? Why was that not the case?
Well, first of all, the winds were only 80 miles an hour, so that would make it only a Cat 1 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. And to be a major hurricane, you have to be a Cat 3 or higher.
Okay.
So it didn't fit the criteria. And then, according to the Hurricane Center, and I think they're right, it transitioned into a non-tropical, what we call an extratropical storm, just before it hit the coast. So it officially wasn't even a hurricane when it hit land. But, of course, the atmosphere doesn't know that. I mean, the atmosphere is already in motion around a hurricane. It doesn't care whether humans say it's not a hurricane more. It still comes into the coast with 80 mile an hour winds and a storm surge. And it does $50 billion worth of damage.
Sure.
So, to me, if a storm like Sandy hit the U.S., say, 100 years ago, looking at the reports and so on, we would have called it a major hurricane. So partly, I think you got to take some of those stats with a grain of salt. Now, on the other hand, Florida hasn't been hit by a major hurricane in 11 years. I mean, the last one was Wilma in 2005, and they are overdue. I mean, that's pretty rare.
Don't say that in Florida in a week. Don't say that, Jay.
Well, I mean, as long as you're not going to be there for 3 or 4 weeks or 2 months, you're probably safe.
Good.
It only takes one. It only takes one storm. That's it.
And I mean, Texas, the last bad storm there was Ike in 2008. So, I mean, Earl was the first hurricane in the Caribbean in 4 years. And that is really rare. But, you were asking about why. Is it climate change? It's been more, I think, a lot of the natural cycles. I mean, last year we had a fair number of storms, but we also had an El Nino develop, and that brings wind shear, and that tends to protect the U.S. And so, the El Nino La Nina cycle is a normal cycle, and that's been part of the reason why the U.S. has it. The other thing, and I don't think people talk about much, is that big upper ridge that caused the long-term drought in California.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the outflow from that ridge, the winds blowing out of that, brought strong upper-level westerly winds over the Gulf of Mexico, Florida, and the southeast, right? That's more shear, and hurricanes don't like shear. So anything that tried to go into that region ran into that shear, and it either weakened or it got turned out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Sure. So a little luck involved there.
Yeah. So, Jay, I know we talked about shear and a lot of other things, and I talk about some of this stuff in Storm School for this week. But when you're looking at, talking about where a hurricane is going to form, what are the conditions it's going to occur in, how for our listeners, how is someone going to predict that? What are some of the conditions that that they can do to predict that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously we have, global satellite coverage 24/7 now. So most of the hurricanes that affect the U.S. start out in Africa. You can track those clusters of thunderstorms from the very time they form in Africa. So the people at the National Hurricane Center and other forecasters are watching those from the very moment they develop, and they watch them as they come across Africa and the Atlantic. Now, not much is going to happen until it gets out over the ocean, because hurricanes, like any other storm, need a source of energy. And for hurricanes, it's the warm water in the upper ocean. So we also have buoys and satellites and ships that measure the ocean temperature. So we know how much energy is available when a storm comes in. So we watch the clouds, they get over the ocean, and then we have upper air, we send up balloons to measure the winds. We get aircraft reports. We've got satellites tracking clouds, so we know what the upper level winds are. And all of those things then allow us to determine when you have what you need for a hurricane. So you need thunderstorms, you need warm water, and you need light winds in the upper levels. And when we see those together, that's where we know we have something we have to watch.
Awesome, Jay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was looking at the satellite this morning with all the storms coming off Africa, and you could see all the Saharan dust come off and all the dry air. So anything that's coming off is just hitting that dry air and boom, done.
Exactly, yeah. And the other thing is that big high, the Bermuda high out there over the ocean, there's so much sinking air right now too, which also dries out the air. Mm-hmm. So, but, probably not much is going to happen in the next week or two. So that's why Brady's safe in his trip to Florida. But
yes.
it looks like the pattern could change as we get here towards later in August.
And that always makes it harder for us in the media too, because unless you got something big, they're like, oh, there's just a couple storms here and there. There's no big hurricanes to talk about, nothing coming at the U.S. So we're like, I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's it.
So
the way the weather.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just, if you've got a question on that, the one of the things I wanted to find out is really get a good story as far as all the research you've done on hurricanes and to get maybe a good story from you. But Brady, did you have a follow up on that?
Nope, I was just trying to get something before my power goes out, but you guys are good. Go ahead.
Yeah, Brady, if you can hear thunder in the background, that's not actually special effects we're playing. It's
there is a mega storm about to hit State College. I think State College might be wiped off the map.
No, come on. Just in football season.
Oh, let's go!
All right, so Jay, you've got to have tons of great stories, interesting stories. I want at least one from you before we leave.
All right. Well, I haven't told this one. Brady hasn't heard this one. Dina hasn't heard this one, but
okay.
And Mark hadn't heard this one either.
There we go.
But it happened when I was still living in Nebraska. I drove down to the Gulf Coast, and it was when Hurricane Bob, and this was back in the 1980s, was coming into the Gulf Coast, right? And it was a Category 1, borderline Category 2, headed over towards Mobile. And, of course, I'm going to Panama City. And there's squalls, there's thunderstorms, there's rain bands, and I'm loving it. Everybody else complaining their vacation's ruined. They're coming away from the beach. I'm the guy driving towards the beach. And then this is before they had lifeguards and anything. And so, you get there and there's nobody there, and then the waves are good. I mean, it's the best body surfing I ever had that day.
Wow, really? You were in the water, huh?
Oh, yeah. No, I love swimming, so yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, Jay, I think this is probably the most important question of the night. Now that we have Maz here, there are two questions really. Who was your best student out of us three?
God.
And
Who wants to hear that?
favorite
Oh.
student out of us
Dina. Dina
Wait,
was.
do I still owe him
there's-
money?
I think they're very clear right answers to both of these questions. So
Now, I think Phil was preparing me, and I'm going to treat this as a lightning round, and I'm going to pass.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, come
We're going to edit
You
that out
were
anyway.
all
Nobody wants to
great.
hear that.
In different ways.
oh,
Well,
It's a
yeah.
pleasure having all of you.
Maz,
just
hey,
say-
so
I'm
Maz
going to wave
just
the
joined
Swiss
us.
flag in honor of the
All right.
Olympics.
oh
I
yes.
thought-
Maz
I
just
thought
joined
perhaps-
us.
I thought perhaps there was going to be a story about Harrington and moonshine or something. I don't know.
wow.
Oh, boy.
Wow, everybody knows that except MJ and I guess. Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, I haven't. We have video.
Maz, hey, Maz, now that you've actually joined us, so we appreciate you joining us on Central Time. What do you have a good question for Jay, since we really haven't given you a shot? All right,
I gotta ask him a computing question, because back at Nebraska, he used to drive to Chicago just to get his numerical models to run. So where?
Wow.
Well, you seriously? Where is
you're dating yourself.
Where's the dream place to go to run the models of 2016?
To be honest with you, it'd be the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. And they have the most powerful computer setup there is. And that's one reason why the Euro model is so good. They have so much computing power there.
So when you wake up at night, like from a nightmare, do you wake up and go, I'm in Nebraska?
No, Nebraska was a great place for me. I mean, it was a really good place for me to start my career as a faculty member.
We loved you, man. It was great.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had great students that gave me a chance to develop my research and get started. You brought up the computing thing. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I eventually ended up leaving was I got access to the Ohio Supercomputer Center, and that was just too good an opportunity to pass up. But yeah, I mean, Nebraska was very good to me. I enjoyed my time there.
He still bleeds red, though. I'm just saying.
No,
Well,
Scarlet.
that works at either
Garland
point.
Gray.
Yeah, there you go.
Very
Yeah.
distinct difference there. All right.
All right, I'm gonna stop this love fest.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stormfront Freaks podcast. You can watch our bi-weekly show live on youtube.com/stormfrontfreaks and download the audio version on your favorite podcast player. For links to our Patreon team of exclusive benefits, show notes, past shows, new videos, merchandise, and more, visit our website at stormfrontfreaks.com. While you're there, check out our interactive chaser radar from our friends at zoomradar.com. If you'd like to contact us with questions or make comments about the show, shoot us an email to questions@stormfrontfreaks.com or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Search for Stormfront Freaks. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next time and tell a friend about the Stormfront Freaks podcast.